All right. Good morning. I've completely forgot, and I did this in my men's group as well, to remind everyone of daylight saving. So I don't know if we'll have many people in here today that are in America because I should have put it on the community board. So I apologize. So today, we're going to be discussing grief. The reason why I'm going into this one today is because I'm working with a lot of people that are going through breakups. I think 5 or 6 at the moment in private sessions with people. So I thought, okay, I'll start detailing the structure of grief because not a lot of people are really aware of it when it comes into your life. It's quite sneaky because there's programming around it as well. And breakups are really the big thing around grief that we go through in order to initiate a process of evolution. Okay, so it was originally written, I think it was originally written by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross on death and dying. She was a psychiatrist, so I'm sure most people have heard of that grief process, the Kubler-Ross model. It's super accurate. I actually think it's quite profound that she discovered this. So what I first do is get people to realize that grief is a process, it's not an emotion. Most people associate grief with an emotion, but it's a range of emotions. It can be, now there's stages of it, but there are emotions as well. It can be hopelessness, sadness, despair, anger, righteousness, rage, longing, yearning. It's a whole complex structure. But for the sake of what the Kubler-Ross model demonstrates, it's denial, that's the first stage. Anger is the second stage. Bargaining is the third stage. Depression is the fourth stage. And acceptance is the fifth. So I'll use some examples that I've gone through on this in my life because I became very aware of it around when my father died. And it was interesting because I kind of went through a process before that, before he actually died, and then I went through a process after he died. And it was really interesting to see. So I was at Christmas with my family, and it just kicked off. Like they were drinking, and my one of my brothers got on the drugs, and my other brother had flown in from Switzerland and landed like 4 hours earlier and was drinking on the plane. It just became a mess. And I was watching at how bad the system was. And I was looking at it through the eyes of like a coach and, a therapist and, like an incoming father and husband. And I was shocked at what it actually was. And this was on the other side of all the work that I'd done in healing PTSD and CPTSD, all of these things I grew up with. And I was shocked. And for 5 days after, I was in denial about it. I was like, I couldn't believe that it happened. And then after that, my mum and dad were trying to sort of get me to come around and, forgive and forget was always the modus operandi of them, which is very common in abusive households and abusive relationships. You will often hear the person say, forgive and forget. That's quite a normal thing for an abuser to use to keep abusing you. My mum would say it all the time, oh, well, you just forgive and forget. That's very convenient for someone that's abused you. Okay, so there's a little bit of a insight there. So then I went through bargaining after that. And this all happened in probably a 2 to 3 week period, 4 week period. Actually, sorry, no, it was a 6 week period. And the bargaining, I was like trying to get them to understand how bad this situation was that they'd created. And they just kept denying it, putting it back on me, blaming me for what I'd done when I was 6 or something as a way to justify or deflect from their behavior, which is typical in narcissistic relationships. And then what happened after that is I hit a depression stage, and it went for about a week. And my father was dying at the time. And so our last exchange my father and I had was him rattling off a long list of things I did when I grew up. I was like 6, 8, 10, 12, whatever. And the last thing we sort of ever said he said, well, I don't know what we did for you kids to put us through such hell. And I said, do you want to know? And he said, yes. I said, we were raised in it by you two. And he just kind of went silent, was like, he wasn't expecting that because a lot of parents will blame their children, but they won't look at themselves to take responsibility for the reflection that the child is. So I went into a depression after this for about a week. As I popped out of it, my dad went to hospital and died a day later. So I went through this then, and then I went through it again after that. Okay, but it wasn't quite as structured as what I did. Quite often we can go through a grieving process before we end a relationship too. Okay, so this is another thing that you need to know. Most people will go through these stages but not fully break free from them. This is why you will see people that will be stuck in a grieving pattern for 20 or 30 years because they don't want to let go, because there's a program associated with each stage as well. So you will go through this as well when you dissolve a program. I've done this enough times now to know it intimately. And a recent one I had was a program I discovered, which was, well, not discovered, that was active in me that then I dissolved, which was I'm in trouble. Okay, that was a big one for me. And a couple of days after I'd dissolved it, I was sitting at a cafe and Joelle asked me, she said, are you okay? And I said, I just feel like a part of me is missing, because it was like I had a USB stick in my head and someone just went and pulled it out and all this information was gone. And that information was me. It was a part of me that had now gone. So when I got through the part of the denial stage of it, I was like, what? Like, really? Is it gone? Like, I don't know what's going on. It was a bit of denial, which I'll start with that stage first. But then I got annoyed that I didn't see it prior to that, which is the anger stage. I got angry that I didn't see it. Then I went into bargaining about how that shows up in the world. So I started to go back and forth about what I was focusing on in my work, because it was a big driver in my work. Then the funny part after that is, as I went into the depression stage, because depression comes with hopelessness, sadness, all these other things, like what's the point? I started to think I was losing my skill to do this work, which was a nice little thing going. And I remember walking on the beach with Joelle and I said, I feel like I'm not really good at this anymore. I don't know if I should be doing this, which is the depression. That's the thing that lands right before you pop through into acceptance, which I'll go through, because I've been working with a woman recently that had stage 4 breast cancer, and we've been working together now for 4 months or something. Her breast cancer is completely gone, and she has now trying to hold on to something in the last remnants of the depression stage of the grief cycle as she moves through, which I'll get into soon. So the first stage of this we see is denial, okay? The two programs that we'll see activate or already be active in this are going to be, this can't be happening, and the other one, I can't let go. These are the two main programs in the denial stage. Now, what I'm referring to with all of this is psychological death. Every death that occurs for you will be psychological until the physical happens. I'm not talking about this programming when someone dies. You will still go through it, but that is a different process to psychological death, okay? That's a different process to psychological death. So denial is the strongest one, and it happens to buffer the initial shock. Okay, it definitely happens in breakups, and I don't know why, but breakups seem to be a specialty of mine at the moment, as I've got pretty much everyone I'm working with in private sessions going through like really deep breakups, mainly narcissistic breakups, because that really is an area of expertise that I go into. So what they don't see in this when you're going through a breakup with someone is that it's never the person that you're breaking up with. It's the version of you that they represent. That's what you go into denial about. Because everyone we attract in, it's like, I use this example, it's like person 1, person 2, beliefs and compatibility, and then over time this starts to wrestle as we want to evolve, and then the beliefs start to change, break up, we go like this, we go apart. this person that you've broken up with was like you in some way and feeding a part of you and representing a part of you in some way. Then once we're going through the breakup, what's the most common thing is, I'll never meet someone like that, which is true. You're never going to meet someone like that again. For the most part, it's probably a good thing, the way that I see breakups. Now, the other part is I don't know who I am without that person. And that's the projection onto the other person. But that's not accurate. It's I don't know who I am without that version of me. Okay, we project it onto the other person. When it's narcissistic, we get pulled into a fantasy. So the thing we have to get out of with narcissistic style breakups and abuse is the fantasy, because we fall into cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance is a denial of reality. And that's what they pull us into when they're doing it. So the reason why we go into denial, though, it's to protect us from the overwhelm that happens as a result of the emergent experience that is taking place. Okay, it's a way to protect us. I remember when my father died, I got the phone call from my brother in Switzerland at 7 a.m. and he told me about it. And I sat on the edge of the bed and I said, all right, it's time to see what you're made of. And I went and trained jiu-jitsu. And then I showed up to podcasts and my groups. Now, some people might say, that's unhealthy, that's suppression. No, it was denial. And that's a normal part of the grieving process. We deny straight away. And it's completely normal and it's completely natural. And that was just the process starting. That's all it is. One of the things I tell people with grief, because everyone's kind of got an opinion on it when they go through it, no one can tell you how to grieve. No one. It doesn't matter if it's a dog, if it's a cat, if it's, hopefully with everyone in this group, never experiences a child or a parent. It doesn't matter what it is, or a part of you. No one can tell you how to grieve. So when the overwhelm hits, what will happen is we'll land as avoidance, numbness, and disbelief. So if you're going through a shock, because generally, you know, the start of a grieving process is met with a shock. It's usually a death or a breakup or loss of some level. Okay? So you could say that this process is the start of crisis. Okay? The crisis structure, because everything in life goes through birth, evolution, destruction, death, birth, evolution, destruction, death, etc. Keeps running through that cycle. And so when you're in it, crisis will always precede evolution. Most people just don't want to actually deal with it because it can be very difficult. It can be confusing, it can be scary, it can be overwhelming, but it's a necessary part. The stronger we deny it, the harder it's going to hit. You will have to deal with it at some point. And there's never a phase where you actually get there in life. Profound peace will always follow profound crisis. Always. It's like that's a law of balancing things out. But you will continue to go through difficult things in life. I think that's why we come here. But what happens is you get better at handling it because you're aware of the process. Once you understand the architecture that you are interacting with, you can deal with it better. You know, I use the concept of building a house, like a blueprint. You do it the first time, it's very strange and difficult. It's not an easy process, but the more you do it, the easier it gets. So the greater the understanding of the structure that you're interacting with, the easier it becomes to navigate it. I've worked with people that have gone through major breakups, years later not being able to get through it. And it's because they move into denial and they never break out of it, especially in narcissistic abusive relationships. You know, my ex, like she's 100% narcissistic personality disorder. Her ex-husband still 7 years later still thinks they're getting back together because he's in cognitive dissonance. He literally can't see it. He's been in denial the whole time. And so as you go through that, you have to start to move through the denial stage and accept it. So when I'm working with someone through a breakup, the first thing we do is we go, I accept that this is over. This is over and I accept it. It doesn't matter how badly we want it to change. We accept where we're at in the moment, because acceptance is actually the final stage of the grieving process. And so acceptance is the quickest way through it. We accept that we're changing. We accept that we're evolving. We accept that. First thing, the more resistance you have to something, that's why there's the saying is, what you resist persists. Okay, so this is a really important aspect. Denial is the first stage. And each one of these phases that you go through with the grieving process, you could say serve as a function to make sure psychological death doesn't occur for the ego, but are the functions that also make sure that the psychological death does occur. Okay, so I'll say that again. Each one of these phases, denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance, to the ego serve as a function to defend the ego to make sure it stays alive, but actually serve as the function to make sure the psychological death happens. It just depends on the way that you look at it. I hope that made sense for everyone. It might be a little bit strange to wrap your head around at first, but this is what happens. So once we get through that stage, the denial stage, we go into the anger stage. Now this is I'm powerless and I'm helpless. Okay, anger is really pain redirected at this stage at others, so we avoid feeling the sadness. When I look at grief, underneath it, it's really just sadness that is asking to come out. Sadness and hurt, they're kind of the same, kind of a similar thing. So we can direct it at ourselves. Most of the time we direct it at others, the situation, and even the person that died. So an interesting thing in a previous relationship I had, the one I was mentioning before actually, the ex-husband that couldn't get over the ex, the mum lost the father. The father died when, I don't know, like 20 years ago or something. She still blames him to this day. Still 20 plus years later, still as angry as day one. So when these grief structures happen, it's very interesting to see how they replay in life, because the mother of this dude didn't deal with it. And so then he kind of like took it on to deal with. So she was in denial the whole time, blamed him, anger, never broke out of the denial and anger part. And then the son moved into the denial and the anger part in the same way. So when we don't deal with unprocessed grief, we'll just repeat it somewhere else through loss later in life. I actually didn't work with him. I worked with a top therapist in Australia, chiropractor. And he rang me and he had gone out one night and cheated on his wife. And he woke up naked next to another woman. And he'd slept with her, didn't remember anything, complete blackout. And anyway, he was having these major panic attacks as he was going afterwards and dealing with the event, because it was overwhelm and everything else. And anyway, I said to him through the process, I said, did you lose someone when you were younger? And he goes, I did. I lost I think it was his cousin. This was 4 or 5 years ago now. And it was his cousin or something. They were best mates. And I said, okay, did you get to process that grief? And he goes, no. And I said, that's why this has happened later on. He lost someone really close to him. He couldn't process it. So because the loss wasn't actually processed, he'll recreate it later so the body can get rid of it. This is what happens. Anything we don't process will show up again later for us to deal with. Okay, so what he did, he went out, he cheated on his wife, it was a major betrayal, or his fiance. Great guy, super clean, like didn't drink once in 6 years that he was with this woman. Ethnic family, 200 members or something, right before, they weren't actually married yet, they were engaged. Told her, ruined 2 families. Like it was huge, man. It was huge. And he couldn't deal with it then because he was trying to deal with what had happened in the past. So he was in this denial stage, in this big anger stage that he hadn't been able to deal with. And so in order for him to deal with it, He told the wife, ruined the marriage, ruined the families, broke everything up because he didn't deal with the grief when he was younger. This is what will happen. If you don't deal with it at the time, it will come back around later on. But the anger part of it, this is really important, that anger is normal. Anger is natural. It's told to us in society that it's unacceptable. People are uncomfortable with it and people can't deal with it. And it's just not. It's not an abnormal part of the human condition. It's necessary. It's basically saying, stay away from me. Anger is a guardian of boundaries. It says, stay away from me. In cases like this, it's protecting the hurt. And that's why it's there. You see, like just processing the anger as well it's an important aspect, but all you got to do is let down the barrier. All of this, especially performative masculinity out there, which is dancing and yelling and screaming into pillows. It might make you feel better for a minute, but it doesn't deal with the hurt underneath most of the time. That's part of it. It's like that can actually be re-traumatizing for a lot of people going into that rage state. It's not, I don't see it as very healthy most of the time. Sometimes it can work if you crack it at the root, but generally emotions are downstream. Like emotion should be a byproduct of when you shift awareness and programming. Whereas if you're just dancing around, screaming in a pillow, wrestling and all that, and this is where a lot of the masculinity stuff where the death is attempting to occur doesn't work, is because they take that stuff from Maasai tribes where they dance around a fire and think that's a rite of passage. They would do that after they would go out and kill a leopard with a spear at 14 years old and maybe not come back, or get stung by psychedelic wasps and left for dead and be pushed to death. Those dancing and the yelling and all that would happen after that most of the time. So we have to be mindful of what we're being influenced about, how to do it. I saw another sacred rage workshop with women bashing the ground with sticks. It's like, it's just not really going to work. You can't deal with that in isolation. It has to be a complete system. So we have to understand that psychological death is trying to occur, and anger is the process in the grieving cycle to protect the hurt. That's all it is, guardian of boundaries. So instead of blaming and projecting it outwards, we have to turn inward. And then this is really important. The amount of anger that is there is directly correlated with how much I'm hurting that I've lost that person. So if you look at the size of the anger, it'll be pretty closely directed with the size of the hurt and the sadness. So if you're super angry, you're super hurt. If you're full of rage, then you're full of sadness. It'll almost be directly correlated. So, next stage, bargaining. It shouldn't be this way. This program is the root of resistance. Okay? This is the most common avenue in breakups, where we talk ourselves out of letting go. And we will justify, we will reconcile, the artful way that I've seen people convince themselves, Mitch, yes, it keeps hope alive. The artful way that people can convince themselves that this person is right for them at this point is hilarious, the things that I've seen. I'm like, oh yeah, okay, cool, yeah, no, it's all good. Yeah, now they've changed. Yeah, a month later they've changed. I see this so often. I've seen this in other people where, I've seen men say this to women that I know where they'd been in a pretty rough relationship for 5 or 6 months or something like that. She breaks up with him and then he goes away for 2 weeks and he's like, oh no, I'm pretty much the man you've wanted me to become. Anyone that sells out and goes and changes that quickly for anyone is a red flag, for starters. It takes time to work through things. If they came back in a year and said, hey, I've made some big changes, I'd like to sort of sit down with you. But most of the time, the version of them's died off, so they don't need to come back. That's the thing. So, and I've seen it where, making promises of major change in like 2 weeks. It's like that. That doesn't really happen. And if it does, then the person's probably not going to be interested in coming back anyway because they've resolved the shit that attracted that person in the first place. Okay, so we talk ourselves out of actually letting go. We talk ourselves out of it. And usually this is where we try to hold on to whatever identity is dying. Things are going to be different. They'll change. This won't happen again. I've done this myself. Right? I've done this in a previous relationship where I was back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. We split up like 30 times or something like that. And then it was the trauma bond that was pulling us back together. I just wish I'd known all of it, but I had to go through that to discover what was actually going on. So now I can help people try to do it themselves without going through what I went through. And we just use all kinds of amazing ways to convince ourselves to go back. And it's, oh, if this was just different, oh, if that was just different. I remember I was working with a mate of mine's ex-girlfriend, and she wanted him to change. And I just asked her a question. I said, do you love him? And she goes, yep. And I said, okay. So could you love him if this doesn't change? And she goes, no. And I said, all right, well, you don't love him. You're in love with the idea of who you think he should be. And that rattled her. And then they didn't break up. They broke up not long after that because she was in love with this idealized version that she was projecting onto him, that she needed him to change for her to be okay. That's not love. That's control. You know, I see this a lot. People trying to get the other person to change to suit them. It's not really love. What I see when I take people into really healthy relationships, you don't want the other person to change, but you accept them if they do. Whereas most people are just trying to get people to change all the time now in relationships, just to avoid their own stuff. And when you get into, more of the healthy adult relationships, you don't need the other person to change, but if they do, you love them through the change and you accept that change with them, but you don't try to get them to change to suit you. It's like, how many times have we said, okay, cool. Even where I live in Byron Bay, I had a mate he's leaving this week. He's moving to Canada, and he goes, "Oh yeah, we're just gonna go for 6 months, and then we'll come back and we'll see what it's like." I said, "Bro, once you leave this place, you don't usually come back. This place is like a place you come to heal, and then you kind of exit out after that. You don't come back to it." And I said, you sound like you're trying to break up from a toxic relationship. It's like, I'll go sort everything out. Let's have 3 months apart and then we'll come back together and see what happens. That's just trying to bargain to hold on to your identity, to give yourself some hope. Like Mitch said, it keeps that hope alive. And I said, bro, like your relationship with this place is done. If you're meant to stay here, life would have let you stay here. But this is a weird place, Byron Bay. It's a very sort of spiritual transient place. And when the land's done with you, it'll get rid of you. It'll boot you out once it's done. And that's what happened to him. But the way I heard him justify it, he was in a bargaining state. I said, dude, you're leaving. Like, you're done. It's time to go. Let it go. So it was a really, really interesting one. And that happens in relationships. It's like, oh, we'll just be friends with benefits. And then you get the text at 1 a.m. on a Saturday night, 3 to 6 months later. And it's like, oh, maybe they've changed. Like the you up text. It's like that whole thing is all around the bargaining stage of not letting go. Generally, though, what I've seen, and this has been proven in studies, is that it really only takes about, on average, 8 to 11 weeks to get over someone. Now, if you've been in a relationship with someone or married for 20 years and got kids, it's probably not going to go like that. But if you can cut contact and you bail, 8 to 11 weeks, and you're good. That doesn't happen with severely abusive ones though, or domestic violence, or major betrayals, or narcissistically abusive relationships. You've got to do the work on those to clear that. Time won't just heal that. There's structures that need to be dismantled in those ones, or borderline as well. There's borderline abuse that lands pretty hard too. Sorry, I got some mold in my house. I'm on the verge of sneezing. So yeah, so that's the part of the bargaining. Sounds like my relationship to Sydney. The city is done with me, and vice versa. Yeah, but still debating with the letting go of the moldy apartment and moving up the east coast. Yeah, it's a tough one because you'd be leaving a part of you behind as well. So the next stage after this, and there's no sort of time frame with this, if you're going through this, if you really want to get over it and move through it, honestly, most of the time when you leave a relationship and you're pretty good, this will get done in the relationship. This is where I see this. I always say this. I'm like, women have usually left the relationship a year before they actually leave. 6 to 12 months, a woman will keep going. And I said, look, if she's nagging you, that means she cares. When she stops nagging you and doesn't give a shit, that's where she goes. That's where she's out. Like, there's not much you can do to get a woman back at that stage. And usually the man's pretty unconscious to it. But it's an important thing because a woman will I always say men lead in direction, women lead in connection. Okay. And so usually a woman will, and women get slammed for this because they'll get into another relationship soon after. But most of the time, they've been done for a year prior to that, 6 to 12 months prior to that. So it's not really that surprising to see someone get into another relationship pretty quickly after that. So depression, something's wrong. And what's the point? So the Something's Wrong program is a foundational program that activates very early on. So this can cause the depressive stage. Okay, this is where we are so close to breaking through. So close. And this is where sadness, despair, I'm over it, I want to give up, I want to quit, life isn't worth living, apathy, life is meaningless, it's pointless, all of it. All of this goes on. This was the woman I was working with that had breast cancer. She'd been going through this point and the cancer's out of her body. Literally the night before we did the session, the doctor was like, there's no more cancer here. It's done. The cancer's finished. And she's sort of like, okay, well, maybe I need to get this done and maybe this protocol and this. And I just said, you're just trying to hold on to something at this point because she didn't know what life was like living in a healthy, peaceful environment. And so she was just listing out, I feel hopeless, I'm not motivated, I'm like, you're this close to breaking through and leaving this behind. But then she wouldn't know who she is without the cancer. It had become an identity. And so she's got one final part of sadness to leave this all behind. And we were talking about this. And I said, what would it be like if this just you acted like this never happened? That you acted like this never happened. And she's like, oh, I don't know. So like me, she grew up in a very difficult environment, very abusive. And she said something around capacity. I can't remember, but I've been dealing with this a lot with men. Like they say they need capacity for difficult things, capacity for suffering. Every single person I work with has an immense capacity for suffering. What they don't have a capacity for is peace. So everyone in this chat that's going through it, every single person, I guarantee it, people don't find me if they've had an easy life. I'm not that guy. People find me when it's like crisis time, where it's difficult and it's rough and it's hard and they've tried a lot and not much works and they don't know why. But I was working with a mate of mine and he's like, I need more capacity for my relationship to hold her storms and all that. I said, dude, you grew up in a traumatic environment. You're sweet for capacity for difficult things. You don't have a capacity for calm. And I said to her, I go, you don't have a capacity for health right now. You got a capacity for sickness. You can handle stage 4 cancer. You're sorted. You can fight that because her whole life was fighting. Same with my life. But like I said to her, I said, you got to ask yourself, do you have a capacity for peace and love and openness? And that's where the tears started to flow. That's where it became different. Because it's very easy to fight. I was very good at fighting. I wasn't very good at remaining calm and remaining cool and peaceful. And now, the only thing I desire is peace. The only thing I want in life is peace. I don't engage in stuff like that anymore. And like I keep saying, well, not keep saying, I only said it once, but profound peace follows profound crisis. So once you're done with the crisis of your life, which is the argument between your false self and your true self, you start to fall into peace, and then that follows. And so another part that happens here, so when you listen to this again, think about where you have an immense capacity for suffering and difficulty and trauma and abuse, and then think about what your capacity for peace is like. We all say we want it, but we don't have it. You'll know when someone's in the peaceful stage of their life. That's what I've hit because their environment will reflect it. I have a peaceful dog. My work is now peaceful. I rarely get slammed online anymore. I was getting it so much. There's constant attack. My relationship is peaceful. I think we've had 2 disagreements in a year. That's about it. And one of the other things as well with maintaining peace is if someone has a problem with me, I don't try to solve it. If that's their problem, it's not mine. Most people in here will be either people pleasers or whatever, and we've been trained to be responsible for others' feelings. Part of letting that go is going, if you've got a problem with me, that's not mine to sort out. Most people in here will go, I need to sort it out, I need to fix it, I've got to do more things and all of that, and I've done that in the past because I was made to be responsible for my parents' feelings. And I just don't do it anymore. I'm like, if you got a problem with me, I don't have a problem with you having a problem with me. But that's on you to sort out, man. I'm not trying to fix that. I'm not trying to fix that. And so another part that happens here in the depression stage is withdrawal. So when you go through this, it can feel the same as like withdrawing from a drug. Because I've said this before, the strongest drug on the planet is romantic love. So the withdrawal stage is almost identical to coming off drugs. I know what that feels like. And you hit a depressive stage, which is usually like 2 to 3 days. And often here, this is where in the withdrawal stage, bargaining happens again. How many times have you had a hangover and said, I'm never drinking again. That's it. I'm done today, healthy for the next 6 months. I'm never going out again. I'm not putting up with this. And then a few days later, you're back at it. It's a bargaining stage. And we all do this again and again and again right before we break through. We feel depressed, we feel hopeless, we feel lost, we feel pointless, and then you get the text from the person. The final little test just before you break through into acceptance. That's what goes on. And what happens is another structure will show up here is when I'm in this stage, now it's I'm depressed. I'm depressed is another structure. It's an identity. And we'll say, okay, cool. Just before acceptance, we'll often replace the previous identity with I'm depressed. So it's another maladaptive, negative program that will show up. You just have to be aware of this as you go through it and go, this is temporary. I'm going through this. I know this will pass. And everything will tell you that it won't. But I promise you that it does. Depression's not a natural state. It's not. It's a necessary part of this function for you to surrender into. It's there to teach you to surrender to it. This is different for people that have gone through, that have got chemical depression. There is an aspect of that. Some people genuinely suffer with that. I'm talking about this as the grieving cycle. So then the final stage is acceptance. And this is where it's going to be okay. And I'm okay. And we begin to adapt to life and we become more hopeful. We become more open to new experiences in life. We start to feel inspiration again. And this is where profound peace will often kick in. After we truly go through the death of ourselves, there will be the depression and then the acceptance, and acceptance will be like a Grand Canyon of peace. It's like an opening internally. It's hard to describe because most of the time people feel like a void that's within them that they try to fill. This is a void, but it's full. Does that make sense? It's kind of like completely empty, but completely full at the same time. So profound peace always follows profound crisis. And this is part of the individuation process. The individuation process is to split from anything internally that is not serving us, from our mother, from our father, to become undivided. That is the whole game of life, is to become undivided. All undivided is no division internally. We're seeing a lot of division in the world. We're going through an individuation process in the world at the moment. We're splitting from old structures that don't work, from tyrannical, patriarchal societies to devouring mother. We're more in a devouring mother now. We were in a tyrannical father. Now we're in a devouring mother in the Western society. That's what we're in. It's not about masculine or feminine. It's about structure of destruction. That's all it is. So it's not a sort of attack on women. That's just been the adjustment as a response to like the tyrannical father. It's symbolic, it's archetypal. It's not literal man or woman. It just depends on how the structure manifests. And we can see that if we don't split from the mother, we become dependent, hyper-dependent. We're dependent on the government. That's why people just give their rights away freely. We're like little children that can't look after ourselves, and we're treated as such. We're in an individuation process at the moment, a global individuation process to become undivided. But in order for the absence of division and the absence of conflict to occur, we must see the division and we must face it, and we must split from that which is attempting to devour us, which is the government. What's happening here in Australia is absolutely absurd. I mean, they're passing laws where they can take your land if it's not used. There's this spare bedroom tax that's being proposed. It's madness. And this like she'll be right attitude is just, yeah, cool, no worries, that's fine, it's all good. I don't matter. It doesn't really affect me. She'll be right, mate. It's like, oh man. But it's going to be necessary for people to wake up. It's going to be necessary. Rach, I noticed in the last 3 weeks, I jumped in the car to explore the East Coast to see where I was drawn to. Ended up in Cabarita Beach and attracted the most beautiful people that open their hearts and homes. Yeah, Cabarita is beautiful. A loving family that told me I have a home there to move into. Yeah, that's life going, come on, it's supporting you. So as we get through this, the quickest way through into acceptance is we have to accept that this is what's happening. We have to accept that this relationship is over and there's a process to dismantle the previous structure internally, to dismantle the programming, to dissolve the programming, to let go of the identity that was addicted to that, because the greatest addiction we have is our identity. Everything else springs from that. And all death is psychological until the physical occurs. So even though you think that you're going to die, you're not going to die. I said this to my client that had cancer. I said, and she's been through the process for a little while now. And I said, if this was meant to kill you, it would have done it already. And she said, that was so liberating, because when you get cancer, it's all about death. And I said, look, man, I know someone that had a brain tumor in 3 weeks, they were dead. This has probably been manifesting in you for 5 or 10 years. You don't just wake up with stage 4. It's been there for a while. And I said, if it was meant to kill you, it would have done it by now, but it's healed. So it was never meant to kill you. It was just a wake-up call for you. So all death is psychological until the physical occurs. And then when the physical occurs, it's over quickly and you don't care anyway. It's done. At this point, once we actually get through it, we will often find deep meaning, deep peace and joy in the event. Believe it or not, it does happen. And true transcendence is when we figure out the gift of the experience. This is when we experience, for me, my biggest thing was narcissistic abuse. That was splitting from the mother, narcissistic abuse, chaotic household. All of that stuff was my curse, which turned into my blessing at the end of the day. And so what it gave me was the ability to help people through that, because there's really nothing out there that I've seen that really navigates it in its entirety, from programming to shared fantasy to structures internally to individuation to death of the mother to splitting from that to addiction to certain things like betrayal internally. The whole structure was shown to me through this. Like, this is what I came here to do. One of the areas is help men split from the mother and help women heal from narcissistic abusive relationships. And that's essentially, that's kind of what I do. That was the gift in it. Because I've seen so many people. I had a good friend of mine. He's in a similar sort of arena to what I am, and he saw me after I'd kind of completed the process, and he goes, "Man, you're just a different person." He goes, "Most people never heal from this ever. They stay traumatized forever. Their entire life is just remnants of this traumatic experience." But I completely died and came out the other side, and that's what happens when you get through the grieving process. Is I remember saying, "I'd rather die than live like this." And so I just had to go through it, and my soul was pushing me through it. And fortunately now I get to help people through that process, because breakups are like, they're probably one of the hardest things we go through, if not the hardest. If you think about it, like whenever there's a breakup that's going on, they're pretty fucking gnarly experiences. But when you know how to navigate it from the actual thing that's happening as opposed to the thing that you think is happening, you can do it with grace. You can do it that's a lot more easier, and you can actually get the transformation from it, and then you'll see the gift on the other side of it, because there's always a gift. And that's hard to tell someone that's in it. I actually remember I had a mate tell me that when I was going through my process. He goes, "Oh, soon you'll see the gift." And I was like, "You motherfucker, you don't understand. This woman should be in jail." I said, "This bitch should be in jail. She's a psycho, you know, rah, rah, whatever." Anyway, did an EMDR session, used my work with it like 2 days later, got the gift, and I rang him and I said, "Sorry, man, like I get it." But on the other side of it, you never tell someone that's suffering that hard that, "Oh, this will be a gift for you." Like, you don't do that. I don't do it. There's an opportunity to see it, and I lead people through that to help them understand that, because it happens pretty quickly once you get it. But you will see once you're through it, the gift on the other side of it. You know, even coming up to Byron Bay and my health being pretty fucked for a couple of years from that relationship, but also exposure to really bad black mold, like a high level of it, taught me to value my health. I hadn't valued my health before that for years. You know, I would party and do drugs and stay out late and not sleep. Now, like, I refuse to go to dinner basically with most people because I want to get to bed early. So it's taught me the value of health. And that's a really important lesson for me, because I thought, oh, I would never actually been able to value my health if I'd not been compromised in my health. That's the important part of it. And I see most health is preceded by some sort of psychological event that needs to die off for the health to come back into play, because it's all about resistance. Mitch, going through that now, have to detox, caught up with me, food, drinking, etc. Yeah, can't ignore the symptoms. The symptoms just get worse until you deal with it. They just get worse until you deal with it. And then the amazing thing about it is once you actually go through it and you start to value health, you go, okay, I become more sensitive to things. I go, okay, I don't really like eating out anymore, because I think, what's the point? Joel can make better food than pretty much 99% of the places that I eat at. Why would I go and pay $40 for eggs and bacon when I can have them at home and she makes it for me? You know, I start to see things like that, not even from a monetary perspective, but just a fuel perspective. Like, why would I put that into my body when I know I can get better? That's just where your health starts to shift and change. And that is where you start to treat yourself better. So all of these things were amazing gifts for me. And when you can start to open yourself up to willingly look at the potential for a gift or a lesson in it, your life changes. Because I just see life as one big opportunity, and it's an opportunity for evolution, and that's what we're in. And the grieving process is the access point for that. And that's the journey. So that's grief, my friends. I did say 30 to 60 minutes, so I got to 50 minutes today. So thank you all for showing up. I love this subject of grief because it's, in my opinion, it's like, it's probably the most important process to be clear on, because every single person here has gone through it, and every single person will go through it again. And now once you know what you're interacting with, it can become so much easier to deal with for you, and there'll be a lot less suffering, which is the aim of the game that I'm in, is to reduce suffering and help people find freedom. So I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in 2 weeks, and 2 weeks will be Q&A and maybe a little mini one-on-one. So I'll see you then. If you need anything, jump on the community board or send me an email. You got the details. All right, legends. Have an awesome day, night, afternoon, wherever you are. I'll see you soon. Catch ya.